Have you ever wondered where the problems in the world today would exist if we had deeper connection to ourselves, others, and the environment and acted from that place? Welcome to the Conscious Action Podcast with your host, Brian Berneman, who believes that connection is the key to taking conscious action as individuals and creating a better world. We are here to raise awareness and inspire meaningful action by sharing stories, knowledge, and conversations with thought leaders and change makers. From sustainability to well-being and everything related to conscious living, our mission is to empower you to be the change that you want to see in the world.
Welcome everyone to a new episode of the Conscious Action Podcast. I am Brian Berneman, your host, and I have the pleasure to be joined all the way from Atlanta in the US by Shaté Hayes. Thank you, Shaté, so much for taking the time and to connect once more. And for everybody that is listening and watching us, what can you share about you? Like the path and the journey of Shaté in this lifetime.
Ooh, I love that question. Well, thank you so much for having me, Brian. I'm so excited to be talking with you again. I love your energy and everything that you're doing. The journey of Shaté, wow, that feels like a very deep question. I guess what I'll start with is the thing that has been bringing me joy so much lately is movement, is just dance in general. And I always identify as someone who's like forever a dancer first, is what I like to say about myself. But my first career was a professional dancer, and I've been dancing my whole life since maybe like 3 or 4, right? So Shaté is a mover, and I didn't know I could have a career doing that. I had been exposed to ballet companies and modern companies, but that wasn't quite who I was. But I had this career as a commercial dancer doing theater and corporate gigs and, dancing with bands and music artists. And it was so incredibly fulfilling. I went to grad school and got a dance degree and became a dance educator. It was just the feeling of being able to sort of sustain my life with dance and this movement practice was something that I was so incredibly proud of. And it was a feeling that I was like, everyone should get to feel this. Everyone should feel this way. And it really just opened the door for the work that I continued to do beyond that work as a career. I started helping other dancers figure out how to build sustainable careers and other creatives. And then I just started helping professionals in general through, my corporate career and workforce development. And now here I am still doing it. I get to talk with people every day about, who they are and what they want to do most in this lifetime and how to tell the story of that and just how to, really live their purpose and love their work. And it truly is still such a joy for me.
Mm-hmm. It's so beautiful. I love, that, that you said I'm a mover, it's
Yes.
like, because as well, that can take in so many different shapes and ways. And I think it's so nice because as you're saying, I love dancing as well.
Yeah.
It's not what I set out to do. Like, I just love dancing by myself. I love moving. And I think that, one of the biggest things a lot of times is when, as you're saying, that you've been so fortunate to be able to actually make a career doing this. Most people don't realize, I think, and I don't know if this is your experience as well, that we can do so many things that are not potentially the typical, like corporate ladder, and that we can actually find something that lights, in a sense, a fire within us, and it's what we're wanting to do and what we're wanting to bring into the world, and we can actually make a living out of that.
Oh my gosh, that is so true, Brian. And I wish more people knew that, but not only just knew it, because I think technology has made it so that people now have more exposure to what's possible. But I wish that they believed it or knew that or gave themselves permission to do it. There's so many people like yourself who I've been able to connect with, even just within this past year alone, who are sort of like charting their own course in this world and sort of going against the grain of what like conventional society might be dictating or saying that we should be doing. For example, I was raised to go to college and get a degree and then get a job. That was like the American dream. And I think it's a noble dream, especially when your family has a history of like not having generational wealth, of having like generational lack, quite honestly. And poverty. And so that education is a way that, they learn to work their way out of that. And so they were like, continue on this path and do that. And I think that is true. And I think that there is value there. And there are so many other ways to make a living. I think even with creatives, people sort of can hear someone say they want to be, a singer or insert other creative practice here. And I think the average person thinks like, oh, you either want to be famous or like, ooh, how are you going to make money with that? Like, are you going to be homeless? And so there's like rarely any conversation around what this middle ground looks like. There's a whole spectrum of ways that you can make a living as a creative, whether you're an educator or you're gigging out locally, or, like there's just so many ways that you can do it. And I think the more that you stay open to it, the more you can see what the possibilities are. But I got to be honest and say that it's risky, not in terms of that you could fail, because that's the truth for any route that you take. It's risky because you are then doing what the average person isn't doing. So you have to then have the courage to be explaining yourself repeatedly when you're like doing something that's not within this box, right? And you have to maybe like seek out your tribe who are doing the same thing so that you don't feel alone. And you've got to, like, when you are charting your own path, sometimes that can feel a little lonely, even though you're not alone. And so it requires, I think, a different type of preparation and moving through that journey, because it's just not typical, but it is very, very possible.
Yeah. And I think that it's so important, as you're saying, to have that courage to be able to do that, because for a lot of people, they are wanting us, especially, like family, parents, they're wanting us to have a life that potentially they didn't have, or a similar life to what they understand. This is safe. It's like
Yeah.
this works. And
Mhm.
and this is one of the things a lot of times and I see this a lot of times, especially with my students at university, is like, they are told by their parents, this is the path. And it's not that they are wrong, it's that worked
Mhm.
for them. And
Yeah.
they want their kids to be, safe, and to be able
Yeah.
to have that potential pathway that is a little bit supposedly more safe,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
not always the case. But without the understanding that, okay, they might want to do something different. They might want to, like do some, sculptures or different types of art or dancing. And because it's not that well known, a lot of the
Yeah.
people that can make a living out of that, whether they are famous or not, it's not typical. So as you're saying, that courage and that belief in ourselves, it's so important, because we need to not only, kind of like bring ourselves to a place of saying like, okay, like I'll do it. It needs to be with everybody else that is trying to protect you, to tell you, are you sure, is this the right thing to do? And,
Mhm.
what if it doesn't work? And like, and my point of view, it's like, and what if it doesn't work? I tried it, like, and if it works, amazing. And if it doesn't, I tried it, and then I can change.
Yeah, that's such a powerful way to live. And I think it's scary for most people, right? Like that the idea of failure just sort of paralyzes folks. The idea of uncertainty, right? The perception of control is sexier than, me going out here trying to figure out, when quite honestly, Brian, like that's all life is. It's one big giant experiment anyways, right? And even if you take a path that feels more certain, the traditional, college get a job route, there's still so much uncertainty there. There are tons of people who've got these really fancy degrees and they can't get a job in their field, or even when they've gotten a job in their field, they're getting laid off, or if they're not facing layoffs and they're facing toxic work environments and they like, hate the people, there's just like so many versions of life throwing us curveballs. And so you might as well just like do it your way anyways, if you're going to have to face all that stuff to begin with.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd love to know, Shaté, it's like for you. So
Hmm.
you still, you said you went and you had your degree, and you were still a mover, you were still a dancer. So
Hmm.
what were the things that allowed you to actually say, like, for yourself, it's like, okay, I'm going to do this. Like, how was it on the people around you? Were they telling you,
Mhm.
is this is not a thing to pursue, and I can just do the other thing, or how was that for you?
You know, it's so interesting when I think back at my younger self, so fresh out of college at like what, 21 or 22, like the audacity of her. Like, how dare you think you could move, across the US to this other place you've never lived before and like forge this career. But the way that I got there is, I had always been performing. When I got to college, my family was like, don't major in dance, like choose something else. And I'm not bothered by that sort of direction because you don't need a dance degree per se to be a dancer, at least not the type that I thought I wanted to be, right? And so I went and I had the opportunity to study other things, and I'm super grateful for that. Like I love that I have a degree in psychology and that it really started me off on this path of really being able to learn how to research something and then produce a body of work with that research. I still use that to this day. So I appreciate that guidance, quite honestly. But then in college, I was still performing. I was on the cheerleading team and I was on step teams and I was like dance performances. I was literally not ever not performing, if that makes any sense. And so it got to a point where after college, I was studying, I was a psych major on the pre-med track. And it sounded nice, but I was not interested in doing that. And so I was out of college trying to study for this the exam to get into medical school, and I was studying long hours each day, and I was just hating it. I was just like, oh, right. So I have the discipline, quite honestly. Even being a young dancer, doing like competitions and dance companies, that really gave me a certain type of discipline to like I know how to sit and get things done. But I was just not happy at all. And I remember thinking at that very young age, I don't want to feel like this every day. Like if I have to do work all day, every day, I'm not going to spend it feeling this way. And then I was kind of like, well, what do I like? And I was like, duh, I still love to perform. So I'm going to go figure out how to perform. I think I had seen someone's like concert on TV and I was like, yes, if they can do that, I can do it too. So I started this plan to move to Los Angeles, and I told my parents like, "Hey, I'm gonna I'm gonna move to LA and I'm gonna be a dancer." And they said, "What? You're gonna do what now? Like we just spent all this money for you to go to college and you're gonna do what?" And it was really quite a dramatic scene of like, "This is my dream and I want to do it," and then being like, "I don't know what you're talking about," and I'm in tears, and it was just like a big thing. But I kept planning anyway. So I was like, no, I'm doing this. And so I got a job. I started saving money. I started looking for apartments. I started taking private lessons in Houston, where I was living at the time. And then once my family saw that, like, no, she's serious, they got on board. And my mom literally drove me there herself. So it was quite the journey. I definitely got pushback. I know what it feels like to be like, oh, they don't understand it. I don't quite understand it. I don't know what else to tell them, but I'm gonna do it anyways. And I can tell you a couple things. One, my mom told me later that it was never that she wanted to be a dream crusher. It was just that she didn't know how to help me, and that scared her. So that could, be insight into how some families are feeling. And then the other thing was that I oh, I just lost my train of thought just that quickly.
All
It'll come
good.
back later. It'll come back later. But yeah, that was the story. It was just kind of like, oh, here it is. It came back just that quick. It was never that I never felt like, oh, I just got it figured out or I'm just so empowered that I'm gonna do it anyways. But for me, it was just like the feeling, that icky feeling of not liking it, what I was doing was worse to me than the fear of trying to figure out all the other stuff.
Mm.
And that's kind of how I'm wired, for better or for worse. A lot of times it's a blessing, sometimes it's a bit of a challenge, but it's just, I can't feel that ickiness. I can't feel out of alignment that way. And so I'd rather just go do something hard to get back into alignment, quite honestly.
Mm. And as you're sharing this, I think that for a lot of people, depending on where they are in their life, that a lot of times it is challenging. Like I work with a lot of people that are
Mhm.
in that crossroads, a lot of times it's like, kind of like I'm not happy where I am, but I'm not sure, this other thing, and to be able to support them into understanding, okay, what's the pathway for them, because we're all different and we all have different pathways, and to
Yeah.
understand, like how do we get to be able to live a life that feels, like aligned, that feels meaningful, that feels purposeful for us, whether other people understand it or not.
That's so powerful. And I'm also I'm grateful that I've been able to sort of live that way. And I also want to acknowledge that it's a bit of a privilege, right? Like I've always had a safety net in terms of my family was there to support me and help me figure things out. And I was afforded with great educational experiences. So I don't want to be here saying like, oh, like everybody just do it, go figure it out, and be reckless with the idea that everyone's circumstances are different. And what I will say is that even if you do have a little bit more to figure out, if you're caregiving, if you're a parent, if maybe your partner isn't on board with it, whatever your situation is, I still want to encourage you and nudge folks to know that it's still possible. Like it might just require a little bit planning in a different way, but I think it's possible still for all of us to have some version of the life that we all desire.
Yeah, and I think that, as you touch that point, I often talk about the fact that I am privileged as well, and
Hmm.
to understand that that is a thing. And a lot of times when I say certain things to some of my students, or to some people when I'm giving a talk or things like that, I
Hmm.
acknowledge that privilege, and also I invite people that have privilege to use it, because
Yeah.
it's as well, like a lot of times people don't understand that, and I think that how, in my point of view, how would someone that doesn't have that safety net or that like support is going to be able to have the courage to all of this if the people that actually have that don't do it? And a lot of times,
Mm-hmm.
we need we need to be modeled how to be, or what's possible. Like if I see someone following their passion and making a living out of that, then that might give me an understanding of, okay, this is possible. I'm not the same person, it's not the same path, it's not the same circumstance, yet this is possible. If I don't have any role models that I can see, like, okay, this path is possible, or that way is possible, and I'm more unlikely to follow that, because I don't know that there's a possibility there.
Mm-hmm.
If
Mm-hmm.
as you're saying, like if I don't know that as a dancer, like unless you're a super famous dancer or you're in a ballet company, that like what's the pathway here? It's like there's
Mm-hmm.
no pathway. Well, there is a pathway. Like you're
Yeah.
showing that, and to be able to understand that as well, it's important, because we a lot of times we see things that are possible only because we see it elsewhere. And I think this is the
Yeah.
role, like a lot of times for minority groups, that, they don't see representation in different fields, whether that's work, politics, films, or, like things like that, that it's like, I don't see myself there. So this is
Mm-hmm.
not possible.
Yeah, you said a lot of great stuff there, Brian. From one, I love the thought you said about like if someone who has a privilege doesn't have the courage to go after it, then someone who doesn't, it's that much more harder. I'm sure. I think that's a really, really powerful thought and definitely something to keep in mind. And even as you were saying it though, I was trying to think of like, do I know anyone? Like, do I know any personal examples of someone who might not have had privilege but still went on to do it? And what was entering my mind, even as I reflected on that briefly, was that I think what we're saying, I agree with. And then there are also some examples of folks who just made a way. Like you hear stories of people who experience homelessness or whatever sort of very tough, life circumstance. And then their sheer will and determination and like refusal to give up sort of propels them. And so I guess in that case, it's not necessarily the courage that's their issue, it's the access. So I don't know why I said all that. Maybe it's just like
Yeah.
we all have some version of of a challenge to overcome, right?
Yeah, definitely.
There's always something.
Yeah.
And yeah, go ahead. No, no.
No, I was going to say with that, it's, I think a lot of times, and working more from a mental health perspective, like
Mm-hmm.
those that don't have that privilege, there's no
Mm-hmm.
other, like it's either staying, and this is a survival mechanism as well. It's like
Yeah.
there's no other
Yeah.
path, so they need to do that. And from the people that have the privilege, the fear of not having that anymore can be what
Mm.
is paralyzing, and that makes them not pursue what they want to pursue.
Oh, that's really good. Yeah, the fear of losing your privilege. Yeah, I think that's really valid too. Yeah, like I was saying before, a whole spectrum of things that sort of keep us stuck. It also has to do, what's coming to mind for me now is that book, The Four Agreements, right? And just like what kind of agreements you have with yourself or the contracts you have with the people closest to you. I think all of that plays a role into, the choices that you end up making for your life. Yeah.
Mm. And I love to get your take a little bit on, like the purpose or the drive, or what's that something that people, that whether that's for yourself or the people that you have worked with all through these years, like how do you see that, like how do people get to that place of this is what I'm wanting to do?
Yeah. For me, it's always like whatever situation I'm in, it's that inner sort of alignment piece. Like, is the way that I feel inside, is what I'm doing matching that, right, on the outside? So if there's a piece of synergy there, that's always what drives me. So, for example, I've transitioned from a dance career to a corporate career, and then from a corporate role to like a nonprofit space, and then back to consulting. Each of those transitions, there was like something within me that one day it was fine, and then after some period of time I evolved, and then it just wasn't as fine anymore. I had outgrown it, and it was not always a negative situation. It was like, okay, I've done this is great, I'm ready for the next thing, right? And
Mm.
so I'm ready for the next level, and so then that propelled me to the next thing, until innerly I was like, ugh, this doesn't feel quite me anymore, right? Because me has changed. So I know that's the case. I've been looking at a good amount of research lately, especially when it comes to folks who are working independently, as a number of the folks that I work with, especially creatives, want to build some sort of independent body of work. I'm reading that, and I think this is common knowledge, perhaps because of the pandemic. People nowadays just want to be working in alignment with who they are, with their value system. They want to have more joy when they're working. I think the pandemic, especially, really just like shook the world and woke us up. It was like, hey, life is too short for all of this nonsense. And so like I think people were taking stock of their life and saying like, if this was it, is this enough, right, kind of question. And so that assessment, the folks that are working with me now are kind of like, I want to have joy and I want to be happy. And I sometimes hesitate to say like just that be happy phrase, because it can come off as a little superficial, but I don't mean like happiness as a fleeting emotion. I mean like a deep inward, like a peace that comes from inside, like a sort of pride in what they're doing, the freedom to like be doing what they feel they're best at, like that type of deeper happiness, inner peace. I think more people are looking for than sort of just going to work to pay bills. I don't think people want that anymore, or a lot of people don't.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
this is one of the things for me that a lot of the things that you just mentioned there, like understanding our values, understand what we stand for, understanding what's in alignment for us at each moment of our life. Because as you say, we keep on evolving. So what
Mm-hmm.
feels in alignment at some point might not feel that in alignment later on. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
it's really important, as you pointed out, like in the last few years, we had a lot of people questioning, how they are living. And I've been, like really fortunate that I got introduced through the Buddhist teachings, the concept of
Mm-hmm.
death and impermanence as a way of actually understanding how do I want to live my life. And the way
Mm-hmm.
that our society has been set up for the last couple hundred years is you work your entire life to make money, to retire, and then to enjoy life. And this is not longer working. I don't know if
Yeah.
that ever worked, but this is no longer working for a lot of people. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, how can I, like, I think that the question now for a lot of the people that I work with is, how can I live my life and make a living out of this alignment, living this purpose, or living, like in a way that I want to enjoy my life presently. And, like if I keep on being alive, how do I set myself up as well for the future? But not just only future focus, also what's present here.
That present moment piece is like a really, really huge. And it's such a delicate balance to strike, isn't it? To sort of, there's a joke, so I've been in therapy for a number of years, I often joke about, or there's a meme, maybe that's it, where it's like trying to be mindful of like your past traumas and like plan for the future, but also be present in the moment is like, it's, that's a really, really hard thing to do. Yeah, I don't even think I have anything additional to add except like that's so true. And I feel that statement so deeply. Yeah.
Mm. And I'd love to know a little bit, like I think that through your work, not only you're helping creatives and sharing all of this, you focus a lot on the career path, but part of it from sharing our stories. Can you talk a
Mhm.
little bit about that piece and the importance for you of storytelling?
Yeah, I think it's that one on just a practical note, working in career and workforce development. So many people, I think, underestimate the power of your story, and not in just like transformation story, like I started here, ended up here, and let me share that with you. I think that's an important story too. But the story of who you are and what value you add is so important because when people don't understand that, just in sort of a work capacity, it will often keep you stuck where you are. So think about, I've done a ton of, in my corporate career, a ton of hiring, and it's kind of coaching my own, direct reports to get other jobs. It's like when someone presents a resume and it's like, what does this mean? Like, it's just a list of jobs that you've done, but there's no coherent narrative about who you are as a professional. If I don't get that as a hiring manager, you don't get the opportunity, right? And so the storytelling piece is just that you've got to make sense of who you are, even if what you've done in the past isn't linear. I actually love when people haven't done linear things in the past because my background isn't linear. And I think your lived experiences make you so much more of an asset to any team, in my opinion. And it's your responsibility as a professional to tell that story. It's not the hiring manager's or client's job to figure it out. And so that's where the storytelling piece comes in. We have to be able to say, okay, this is who I am. This is who I serve. This is how I serve them. And then this is how all of these little pieces in my background come together to help me do that. This is why you need me, right? And so we have to be able to talk about our work in that way. I've come across so many people who, even as they're trying to transition to the next thing, they're like, oh, I've only been a teacher. I've only done customer service. Like we're so hard on ourselves. I've only done this thing, I've only done that thing. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You've done, you work in a call center, you answer like 1,000 calls an hour. And like, let's talk about it in that way. Let's like dust your shoulders off, push your shoulder back, head up, and you've done some good stuff. Let's tell that story and let's be proud of it. So it's
Mm.
that part of the work that is super, super meaningful to really help someone sort of go from like this posture of like not enoughness to be like, oh, wait, I have done some things and this is what it means and this is what it's meant to me. And like to be able to, move forward, chest out yeah, it's really beautiful.
Yeah, and I think that, as you're sharing I think that and this is just my belief. I believe that we are all intrinsically valuable as
Mm-hmm.
beings, and as well, all of our journeys are different. And because
Yeah.
sometimes it's it's hard to understand our experiences, how they bring value to life. I have so many times, so many people that, especially women, that I work with, that they are like, we are talking about different aspects of their life, and when we get to work, it's like, I'm just a mom. And I'm like, whoa,
Mm,
it's just a mom? Like, just remove
mm.
that. Like, that's one of the biggest jobs that we have in life and in
Yeah.
society. And it's kind of like, as you're saying, it's this, like just belittling ourselves because perhaps we believe that in comparison to others, we don't have enough, or that, it's not as glamorous or whatever it is that we might believe. And it's like, no, like this is my story, and every story is important. And
Yeah.
I also really appreciate what you said about your job not being linear, because I have done a lot of different things. And like
Hmm.
and I remember, like, once I was talking with one of my students that they they had, like, they did, like, in a period of 3 years, 6 different jobs. And they were like, oh, now I'm going to get everyone to think like I can't stay in one place, or they're not going to hire me because I jump around. I'm like, well, let's go back to why did you change? And tell that
Hmm.
story. Why did you
Hmm.
change? Because in 3 of those jobs, they were toxic environments. So you left because of that. It's not, like that. So if you have that context, it's a very different
Yeah.
thing. And I know this,
Yeah.
like from my experience of having moved to so many different places around the world. Of course, I changed jobs a lot of times because I was moving countries. So,
Hmm.
I have, like, I, I don't really use it anymore, for a long time, but for the first few years of my working career, I kept on hopping from thing to thing to thing. And it was like, well, of course I did that. I was just exploring myself, and I was exploring the world. And if someone doesn't see that context, they will be like, do we want someone that keeps on changing job all of the time? Or being able to, as you're saying, like, I have all of these, like, experiences across all of these different industries, or across all of these different skills, so I can bring a
Hmm.
lot of value into whatever it is that I'm applying for.
Yes, yes. And that's exactly where the storytelling comes in, right? So like we have to be able to put into words in a way that is most relevant to what they care about, why your story is so valuable. That whole note you said about the mom, so, so, so true. I heard someone say that recently about the work that they're doing, and they do a lot of blogging, and they were kind of saying a similar vein, like, I don't feel like I have anything interesting to talk about. I don't have any stories. And I was like, homegirl, your 11-year-old knows how to make eggs in 4 different ways. Like that's that's a big deal. Everybody's 11-year-old doesn't know how to, how to do that. But I think we all sort of there's this other book, The Hero's Journey, right? Like, so that whole idea, and I heard someone recently say, like, we kind of always put other people as the heroes, and like, we're rarely the hero in our own story. And I think what I get to do is sort of help people put themselves back into that hero's position. Like, see yourself just as valuable and awesome, or insert whatever other word as you do, the person that you admire. So
Mm.
it's how can we do more of that, and not to be arrogant with it or place yourself above other people. It's not for that reason. It's to say, no, this is what I've done. This is how I can contribute to this cause, and this is why, it matters. I think it's important that we be able to say that confidently, you
Mm.
know.
Yeah, and because I use the hero's journey sometimes as well. Like, I actually, for some people, I tell them instead of the word hero, because for some people they see that with specific connotation, and say you're the
Yeah.
main character of your film.
Yeah.
You're the main character. So let's like, whether it is the hero or not, you're the main character. So what are you going to do with that? And I actually, like, I had some years ago this realization that I wasn't sharing my story
Mm.
as much. And I remember I was running this workshop, or it was a talk, I can't remember what it was, like some years ago. And then someone came and it's like, you're so far from, like, I was talking about stress and, like, following our own path, and
Mhm.
like path of living more consciously. And they were like, I can't, like, they told me, like, you're so far away, like, I'm nowhere near you. And I'm like, well, I was where you are.
Mhm.
But during that talk, I didn't focus on sharing that. And
Uh,
and later on, I realized I need to be able to share that so that they understand I know where they are, and it is possible, if they are wanting to follow a similar path to being well or to live without stress, they need to be able to understand, I used to be that, and now this is my current experience. This hasn't always been my experience. This is just my current experience. And this is one of the things that I realized, like, okay, I need to share more about my story. Like, I need to be able to get people to connect with me in that way.
Yeah, 1000%. Even I wholeheartedly believe in that. I think that's the way that I started helping dancers with build their careers. I just started sharing all the fumbles that I made. Every, like bombed audition, every time I didn't do the right thing with my taxes, like, the tears I shed with my family and trying to build my career. I was just like, I'm going to tell everybody all these things. It was everything that I wish I had known when I was starting out. And even now with the work that I do for the folks who are on my list, each weekday, Monday through Friday, I'm sharing I legitimately share stories. Like my subject lines are the time I bombed my first audition, the time I tripped and fell in front of Chris Brown, like the time, like all of these like fumbles that I've made because that's where the lessons, that I've learned kind of come from. And so I think it's really important to, like you said, relate to the people around us so that to your earlier point, they can see models of what it looks like to make different choices or, have the version of their life that they really are excited about.
Yeah, definitely. And so I would be, I'd love to know if for everybody that is listening or watching us, if they are potentially thinking and they are not there of, like, okay, like I want to do something different or I want to follow that inner knowing or that
Mhm.
intuition. What are some of the things that you would share with them? Perhaps some of the things that you already shared, but like what are some of the things that you would love for them to know?
I love that question. First thing I'd love for everyone to know is you can, period. Like whatever it is you're sort of like starting to think about and wonder, like whatever this inner pull is, listen to it. Don't suppress it. Don't stuff it down. Just like explore it. Like no pressure. Doesn't mean you've got to act on it tomorrow. Just like see where it takes you. That's one thing I'd say. The second thing I'd say is like really pay attention to sort of the small things. I think people get intimidated by words like purpose and passion because if they feel like they don't have either of those, they're like, something's wrong with me, I'm broken. Let me just stay in this job that I'm doing. And I'd love for us to take the pressure off of purpose and passion and just like start asking yourself questions like, well, what are the things I'm serious about? What do I like doing? One question I like to ask the clients that I work with is like, if you could do anything every single day and like you didn't have to worry about bills, what would you wake up each day and do? Like just think about stuff like that. What are the things that piss you off? Like, what are the causes that move you and bring you to tears? What are the things that you like to do for fun as hobbies? Like, pay attention to all of those things. What are the things that you enjoyed in the jobs that you've had? What are the things that you've hated? Right. And then the things that stand out to you most, start playing with some of those keywords, put them in a Google search or something, and see what kind of work comes up. Maybe I found that in people I've worked with recently, when I'm sitting here trying to do all this alignment work with them, like, what do you want to do? A lot of people already know, Brian, and they're just too scared to go after it. So if you really, really already know, you don't even have to do all of that stuff I just said. Just start like taking a look at what could it look like to do some version of that in a small way every single day. That's where I would start. Like just be super, super clear on the what first. And once you know that, then you can start putting small steps towards like getting to the what. But it doesn't have to be an overnight thing. It doesn't have to be intimidating. I'd also say like just be mindful. There's going to be a whole bunch of mind trash and limiting beliefs that come up, and it's the case for all of us. Like the people who go on to do things, we're all scared. We just do it scared, So it's just yeah, just you can just do it.
Beautiful.
Mhm.
And I think like with that, I really appreciate saying sometimes as you're saying that purpose or passion or all of these big words, like sometimes we don't connect to what they are or we don't know, and it's like find, as you're saying, those little nuggets or those little glimmers or those little things during the day that it's like, as you're saying, what would I do if I don't have to think about money? And
Mm-hmm.
I think that this is one of the fascinating things nowadays for me is there's so many possibilities. Like I know
Yeah.
people that they make a living playing video games. I
Mm.
know people that make a living, like through using Patreon or, doing art or, like being able to get funding or different things. There's so many ways that, again, if we don't know that that's there, it's challenging. And I think that this is why, like, once we get to understand our why and what's the driving energy behind what we're doing, then how we're going to do that, then okay, we can figure it out.
Yeah.
And knowing what's behind that, it's so important. So yeah, I love that.
Mm-hmm.
So tell for everybody that is listening and perhaps is resonating with you and would love to know a little bit more about you and the work that you're doing, where can they find you?
Oh, yeah, I love that question. So, if anything kind of like perked your ears a little bit about what we were talking about in terms of like having a career that you love, or even just trying to figure out what that thing is that you love, I do have a couple of resources to help walk you through some of the reflection that I was just talking about. It's a career match guide, quite honestly, and it will give you some pointers and guidance on how to maybe find the strengths, your top strengths. It'll give you some guidance on what kind of questions to be asking yourself so that you can reflect and get a little bit closer. But you can find all of that at lightmycareermatch.com. And you'll also be plugged into those daily fumble stories that I told you about earlier too. So that's lightmycareermatch.com.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Shaté, for this time. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for, again, sharing your story and bringing this to more people and the work that you're doing. So yeah, thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much, Brian, for having me. This was such a pleasure. I love this conversation.
Thank you. And thank you everybody for listening and watching to us. Let us know what resonated with you. Share some of your stories as well, like whatever it is that you're finding in this episode. I would love to keep the conversation going. So thank you everybody for listening. Thank you, Shaté, once more. And I'll see you all in the next time. Bye.
What did you like the most about this episode? Take a moment to think about what change you can make in your life today.
Share your conscious action on social media using #ConsciousAction and tagging @ConsciousActionNZ so we can celebrate your impact on the world and create a ripple effect.
One easy action we would love for you to take right now is to share, like, and subscribe to this podcast. This will help us get these messages out into the world and inspire more people to take conscious action in their own lives, contributing to the better world we hope for.